Alright guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to the last part of my top 30 favorite games of all time video playlist that I've put together. This is numbers 5 through 1, my top 5 video games, personal favorites, not what I consider to be the best games, but just my favorite video games. And it's taken a little while to get to this point, but glad to finally be here. So anyway, without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump on into this. So I'm going to start with number 5, and we're going back to a PC game. In fact, this particular video is more PC games than anything else. That fact alone kind of blows my mind that it's 3 of my top 5 games of all time are PC-only games. I never would have thought I would have gotten to that point because I've always been such a console guy. I've always been such a PlayStation guy. I've always been, like, in particular, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2. But I played some PC games over the years that really did a lot for me. And especially one of these that's tied into a non-video game property. So anyway, let's just go ahead and start with that. Number 5, this is the XFiles game for the PC. Much like Phantasmagoria Puzzle of Flesh and Riven, the sequel to Myst, XFiles game is a point-and-click adventure game set in the XFiles universe. It does include Mulder and Scully, but you don't play as Mulder and Scully in this. You're actually playing an FBI field agent in Seattle, Washington, who is tasked with finding Mulder and Scully because they've come to the area and then they have disappeared, and you gotta discover what's going on with it. This is another PC game from that era that has a lot of discs, 1 through 7 different discs. These covers are cool, but are definitely really dark, so I don't know how it's going to come across in the video. The fact that it says words on there: deny everything, trust no one, disc 3, I want to believe on disc 4, disc 5, the truth is out there, disc 6, deny everything, 7 says trust no one. So they looped a little bit there, but excuse me. This version here in this little box is my original game copy from all the way back in 97, 98, I think. This is the full complete box set, a big box version that I picked up a handful of years ago online because it wasn't very expensive. So this is what I had originally for my copy that I just showed, but like a lot of dumbasses from back in that time, I took the box and I threw it away. There's the cover. This is plastic, like a clear plastic in here. Some of the glue is coming apart off of there, but it's still pretty well intact. It does have some grooving, some bends, and it's a little misshapen. But in the original box version of this, you'd find that same box copy like the one I just showed. And then if you went all the way in on this box, there is definitely one other really cool thing, and that's the Prima strategy guide. Hey, neat. And in the back of this strategy guide is a making of the game disc, which I don't think I've ever looked at because I also have this strategy guide. Sadly not too close at hand that I could pull it out, but I have the strategy guide for this game, the PC version of this game, that I've also had since way back when, and I don't think that strategy guide that I had includes that disc in there. So it's kind of cool to pull this out and look at this right at this moment, even though I bought it a few years ago, and realize I've got something in there that it didn't either dawn on me or I forgot about it. I think that's everything that's in here. inside the game, the case for the game itself, as I showed in this first one, is the manual for the game, with how to do actions and control the game, different stuff like that. Back in the old days when we used to actually get that kind of stuff in games, regardless of whether they were PC or console. So anyway, I just thought that was a really cool thing to have as a part of my collection, to have an actual big box PC version, just like I showed with the Riven game. So anyway, that's pick number 5, the XFiles game for PC. As I was mentioning before, it's a point-and-click adventure. You take control of an agent in Seattle, Washington, named Craig Wilmore, who comes to work one day, meets up with his partner, and discovers that there's some bigwig from Washington, D.C., which turns out to be Assistant Director Skinner. He's looking for his missing agents. You talk to him and to your own direct superior, and then you go out and you start trying to find Mulder and Scully. I really liked it because I've mentioned it before in previous videos, but of course if any random person just stumbles in here, I have a rating system for things like games and movies and shows and books. Wanting to be the character that you play as, like to be the main character of a show or a game or whatever, like say for example the X-Files, wanting to be Mulder means I really like something. But if I want to be an original character, or myself in that world, but an original character that belongs in that world, means I love it even more, because it's not just about I want to be this person. It means I want to live in and experience that whole entire world uniquely for myself, without the identity of the character that's been created in that in whatever that property is. So X-Files has always been one of those things. To me, I would not want to be Mulder. I would want to be an FBI agent who maybe believes and is out there in that world, in that version of our world, investigating things and discovering things for myself. So in this game, the fact that you get to play a character who is that, and who's also looking for Mulder and Scully, who's peeking into the conspiracy that they didn't know anything about and seeing things for themselves, is really, really cool. It's very well written, it's very well directed, it's very well acted. I don't have an issue at all with any of the main actors and characters in the game. There's a few characters, little minor characters here and there that you can tell were probably never meant to be acting. They were just, a small part that somebody just got, and they did their small little bit, and then that was it. That's like the only knock that I would have against it, is every once in a while bumping into a character and you're like, they're definitely not an actor. But the story is great. It has moments of humor, it has moments of tense action. It, like I said, completely delves fully into the mythology. It takes place sometime, I believe it's supposed to take place sometime within season 3, or it's between seasons 3 and 4. And that is prime X-Files, prime mythology of the X-Files, in my opinion. So that's another big reason why I just love it. It's a perfect companion piece to play if you love that point in the X-Files, or especially like if you're watching that point of the X-Files. Lots of people are like, you got to watch all the seasons, the 2 movies, the new seasons that came out recently, a spin-off show like The Lone Gunman, or not exactly a spin-off show, but known to be a part of the mythology, or a part of the X-Files universe, is Millennium, the other show that Chris Carter created that's supposed to have a tie into it. But I rarely ever see people talking about playing this game and the other X-Files game. I didn't grab the other X-Files game because I don't think it's as good, anywhere near as good as this one. But they did have a PS2 game that was, if I could call it anything, it kind of controlled like a Silent Hill or a Resident Evil survival horror game. I just love the point and click adventure thing for something like this. So that's why XFiles is number 5 on my all-time favorites list. So we'll go to number 4 on the list, and this one's a big one. It's another PC game, and it's a big old pile on my desk here, and this doesn't even come anywhere close to it. But this is World of Warcraft for the PC. This is my copy of the original game. Now, I didn't buy this at the time that it first came out. I was a late adopter of the franchise. I didn't get into World of Warcraft until 2009 at the behest of a really good friend of mine who loved the game so much. He kept telling me, we worked together at Walmart back in the late 2000s, and he was always telling me that I would love this game because, you know, he knew I loved video games. He thought this would be right up my alley, and I always thought it would be cool, but I didn't like the idea that you had to buy a thing, pay a monthly subscription, buy an expansion. Here's my Burning Crusade box. And then you'd go and play this game, and you'd play online with a bunch of other people, and that's not really my thing. And then you'd play for so long, and then you'd buy another expansion. Here's Wrath of the Lich King. For most people, this is their favorite one. I don't think this one folds out to the same degree the others did. But there's Wrath of the Lich King. I do acknowledge the fact that this is a really big, like Burning Crusade, and then this, everybody really loved them. My favorite expansion is Cataclysm, because I loved the balls that it took to take your game that had been around for like 6 years and just completely break it, but in a good way, in a way that makes sense. I'll talk about that more here in a second. These are my 4 physical versions with discs, with the books and stuff that come with them. I ended up having to get Mists of Pandaria digitally, but this was a display game, or display box, game not included. But this was the thing that we had at Walmart when I was working there, and I was like, I want one of those when they come off the shelf. And so I managed to score one of these, even though I didn't get the game physically. I bought Mists of Pandaria digitally, and then I also ended up getting Warlords of Draenor, which was the expansion after this one, also digitally. Bums me out though, because every expansion that I'm aware of has had a physical version other than the current one, Shadowlands, that's been out since late last year. That one at Walmart, we only got a digital card for it. The last 2 expansions that I played, this one and Warlords of Draenor, I had to buy them online. And then there's been Legion, Battle for Azeroth, and Shadowlands, I believe in that order. That's how long it's been since I last played the game. I love the game, but rewinding back to my story about when I first got into World of Warcraft, the idea of a game, no matter how cool, no matter how epic, no matter even how many of my friends are playing that game, the idea that you had to pay $15 every month to play that game, on top of the cost of the game itself, on top of plenty of in-game microtransaction type stuff that you could do. I'm guilty of paying money for mounts and pets and things like that you could have in the game, and that's all the reason for it, is you pay them and they give you a digital thing on the screen. I got exhausted by all that, especially eliminating the microtransaction stuff, eliminating the WoW store where you can buy just cosmetic stuff and mounts and pets. Eliminating all that, just the idea of paying $15 a month to play a game when you also have a whole bunch of other games and stuff that you can do drove me a little crazy after a while. That's why I would play for a while and then I'd dip out. some people would complain that there wasn't enough content. They'd get through all the content, and then it'd be months before new updates and a year or two before the next expansion. Me, it was just a matter of, gosh, I'm paying for this. I feel like I have to spend a bunch of time in the game, and then I'm neglecting a bunch of other stuff. Plus, I have to have internet with it. So a lot of the years that I've missed in the last, say, 5 or 6, part of it was because I just didn't have internet. If you don't have internet, you can't play it. So it got to a point where it kind of weighed on me, and I've drifted away from it. Now Blizzard, unfortunately, a lot of people involved with Blizzard and World of Warcraft are in the midst of a big shitty scandal that's going on with them, and it does kind of make me feel like I wouldn't want to give them my money right now anyway. But that's not going to change the fact that this is one of my all-time favorite games. It gave me a bunch of years of stuff to do, fun to be had with friends in real life, with friends that I met through the game, and a lot of that was by myself. This is the game that I know that I have like definitive numbers to show it. I've spent the most time on 2,700 hours total amongst all my different toons or characters that you make in the game. I went in the last time I played it and went to every one of my characters, and you can see how many hours you've played, and I added them all together. Came to 2,700-ish hours on one game, and I know people who have put 5, 6, 8,000 hours into this game and more. That's like real people. I don't consider, say, World of Warcraft esport types, people who are PvP. I don't consider people who produce content online, who are going to have thousands and thousands of hours in there. I'm just like regular-ass people who work regular-ass jobs, but also want to give some time to a game like this. I know people who dwarf my numbers in comparison. My numbers are just puny when it comes to some people who I know have played the game. So the reason why I've put so many hours into it and why I love it so much is just because it is a game that can engulf you. It can just swallow you up in there. I'm acknowledging that for some people that's like an addiction that becomes really bad. But for me, it was just like I would put some music on the computer and I would play that music over when I'm playing the game, and then I would just go and I'd go pick up quests, and I'd go through the zone that I'm in at that particular moment, leveling up, doing quests, exploring the world, going after the achievements that are easy enough for a noob like me to do, because even with the years that I have in the game, I'm still a noob. I never had any interest in getting the maximum gear. I didn't want to go do dungeons and raids. I didn't want to go do end-game content. I didn't want to do the PvP. I was sorely disappointed that there were some achievements, really cool achievements with nice mounts or titles or things that you would get at the end of them that just so happened to include some form of PvP in it, and it pissed me off because I was like, I don't want to go into these battlegrounds and do a stupid little thing to pop an achievement. I just want to play the game. Because the game world is huge. There's so much stuff that you can do. Like I said, it's everything to everybody, in my opinion. If you do want to do all that stuff, if you want to gear up, if you want to get in a guild that wants to do all of the raids, if you want to push for all that new content every time it comes along, you can do that. But you can also just wander around in the world and do like I did. Sometimes I just go someplace. It's one of the few games that I actually can kind of tolerate the fishing, because there's not too much to it, and there are some fun achievements for doing that. And so there are times when I would just go fishing somewhere. And my main character, in the end, the character I spent the most time on was a Death Knight, and one of the spells that I had was the ability to walk on water by basically freezing the water underneath my feet. So I'd go to lakes and places like that and just wander out into the middle of them and then just sit there and fish. And nobody would bother me unless they just wanted to swim across the water. And I never played in any PvP servers, so nobody could just come up and fight me out of nowhere. But I really liked the... I can't remember how I put it before, but one time I was waiting for, I don't know if I was waiting for something, but in the game, especially years back, before they allowed you to fly and mount in certain areas of the game, you would have to go to a griffin, and there'd be certain spots on the map in each zone where you could get one of these griffins and fly to a certain place. And you'd have to sit there and excuse me. You'd have to sit there and actually ride out the whole entire flight. But I was there at a thing. I think it was because there were a bunch of people there, and I was like, "This is kind of cool. What are all these people gathered up to do? They're probably going to be up to something fun." But I would have never talked to anybody and tried to join them. I would have just been like, maybe I'll tag along and see what's going on. Well, while I'm sitting there, while all these people are gathering together, somebody actually DM'd me or whispered to me or whatever the terminology is and was, and said, "Man, why is your gear so like low level for your level?" And I just said, "Well, because I'm one of the few peoples who is playing a multiplayer game as a single player gamer," or something to that tune. And I was like, I just kind of want to go around and explore and learn lore, and you do a lot of that by doing quests and finding items. And you also get lore by going into dungeons and raids. But what I would do is, once I was like, say when I was level 65, I'd go back to those level 20, 30, 40 dungeons. Then I could handle them by myself. Even if you have the best gear, if you go into a dungeon or a raid by yourself, that's a dungeon or a raid that's at your character's level, and you have all the best stuff, you're more than likely not going to get through it on your own. But I didn't want to do that. I don't want to do a game that requires teamwork, because I don't like having a role that will put me at a center of attention in any way. Like, you're not going to necessarily be the center of attention, but if I always like to do DPS, damage per second. I didn't give a shit about tanking. That seemed like a thankless job and one that I wouldn't want, and I didn't want to be a healer because that's not fun to me, to stand in the background casting spells. So I like to be a DPS. I was a warrior at first, and then, like I said, I did the Death Knight, and I just wanted to go up to creatures and stuff and hit them real hard, without necessarily having them suddenly direct all their attention on me. That's my naive mind and my uninformed mind, that even after all those hours of World of Warcraft, that's how I discern the difference between a tank and a DPS. A DPS is going to hit for a lot of damage real quick. The tank is also going to hit really hard in such a way that it causes the whatever you're attacking to sort of direct at them, but they can handle it better than us as DPS, and definitely way better than the healer. But even in that role, the easiest role, the role that a lot of people are like, they get disgusted because everybody just wants to be DPS and nobody wants to do the other roles. I still would feel like I was, if I'm not pulling my weight, if I'm dying a lot, if something bad is happening, if I'm not doing a direct attack instead of an area of effect attack, and doing it at the right time, if I don't meticulously know every boss and mini boss and group of mobs in a raid or a dungeon, then I'm going to have people looking at me and being like, "You suck, get out of here." And some people said, well, that's the reason why they have the looking for groups and looking for raids and whatnot. That's what that function is for. And I'm like, that's even worse. That puts me in with a bunch of random people. They may never see me again. I may never see them again. But if I'm in a dungeon and they're like, this guy sucks, and they're either disconnecting or they're voting to kick me out, that would crush me. And so I was always just like, I'm not going to put myself in that situation. I'm just going to run around in the world and do whatever I want to do. World of Warcraft is huge. The Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, that's your first areas. I was thinking that that was shown on one of these boxes, but maybe I'm wrong. And then eventually you get to Outworld and the Northern Kingdoms, and then once you get into Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria and later things, there was all kinds of weird stuff. Zones that were added directly into the map, new worlds that you could go to. But it's just huge. Every zone is really, really large. Quest givers all over the place, having you do all kinds of stuff. Sure, some of it's monotonous, little shit, like go kill 10 of these, just kill 10 of those straight up. But then over here, they'll be like, you need to collect 12 of this item, and you have to kill these mobs, and maybe they'll drop it, and maybe they won't. And then sometimes you get things that are a little bit more involved, and they feel like storyline missions. But the variety is what I love about it. There's just so much to it. And then, like I said, you can go fishing. You can go mining. You can do these little professions, and I hated this. I hated the fact that I couldn't get into it. They had a bunch of professions that you could do, like mining, blacksmithing, mage, alchemy. There's more enchantments, stuff like that. And what that did was you'd have to go out and gather resources. It's sort of an early version of what I stumble across nowadays in like survival crafting and resource games like Minecraft and the like. You would go and get all these different materials or mats, and you would get enough of a certain kind to make a certain item. And by making those items, a set number of times or whatever, you'd level up that. And you'd have to do it enough to get to a certain level where you would suddenly be able to make certain kinds of gear and weapons that people would actually want to buy from you. You could make these things and trade or sell them to other players, or you could stick them on the auction house and people could buy them. To me, though, that's just, it's a nitpicky thing, but I hate, go get this amount of stuff. Okay, I have a bunch of this stuff. Now make this. Boom, now you have the ability to make another thing. So to make that other thing, you're going to need some new materials, and you're going to have a set number of that last thing you built. So if you don't have enough of that last thing that you built to make enough of the new thing that you're gonna have to go back to the original materials to make that one, go get the other materials and make this one, and now you have another thing that you have to make. And it's like, it's not, in my opinion, it's not simple, it's not easy, it's not intuitive, it's not fun, but for other people it is. And once again, in World of Warcraft, it's all about choice. You can make whatever kind of character you want, whatever kind of class that you want, and then you can seek out those professions if you want. You can just go questing like I always did, go explore the entirety of the map, just going around enough of the map to kind of like open up all on the map that you look at on the screen. It's like a lot of other games, you move around and travel around the map, and suddenly it opens up. Oh, now I can see a location, a place here, a place there. And then once you do that exploration for the whole zone, ding, you get an achievement for exploring that zone. And then once you do it in an entire area, you get an achievement for exploring the entirety of that, Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor and etc. I love that stuff. In some ways, when I was able to avoid and get away from the quest or the raids and the dungeons and the expectations of other players, which would stress me out and give me anxiety, when I'm just out there doing that other stuff, then it becomes like a Zen game for me. It's kind of tranquil. I can just kind of lose myself in it. It's a big world, and it deserves to be explored, and it deserves to have all of that information plumbed to its depths. And that's what I love about it. That's what I love about the game. Unfortunately, questing in the zones and the normal zones as you're leveling up was, in my opinion, relatively easy for a noob like me, until that last Warlords of Draenor. I felt like the zones that you played in for that expansion were awfully tough in terms of that normal gameplay that I was into. That threw me off a little, but like I said, the paying for it, and then feeling like you have to give it more of your time, and then I'm neglecting my other things, that's where it just kind of went away. The memories that I have of it are amazing, and I love it. And I know that if I wanted to go back and pay for it, although I'd rather the game just finally one of these days goes free to play, because I know their subscriber count has went way down. People are playing stuff like Final Fantasy 14 and other MMORPGs. I feel like unless they're gonna like ditch WoW and do something different, I figure they should go to a free-to-play model. They'll still make a lot of money off those microtransactions and stuff. But you know, another thing that they've done is since I've played last, I haven't been around for it. They've done World of Warcraft Classic, which is going back to the original World of Warcraft as it was back then and letting you play it again, you know, 16, 17 years later, although it was a couple of years ago when it came out, but you understand what I'm saying. I would have liked to have had a chance to do that, since I didn't come along until Wrath of the Lich King. I didn't get to see what it was in the beginning, and lots of things had changed even by Wrath. It had made it more accessible and kind of sort of somewhat easier for players who were new to the game. And that's the reason why I ended up in it. It's why it stuck with me. I loved it, and it was accessible enough to a dumbass like me that I could play the game. So anyway, that's World of Warcraft number 4 on my list. Number 3 on my list is the next PC game, and surprise, surprise, in my top 5, 2 online-only PC games. Like I said, it still blows my mind, but number 3 on my list is Garry's Mod, and it's a fantastic experience. One of my favorite things I've ever got to experience in my life as a gamer, and it's something I discovered in like I discovered it probably like 2012, 2013. I think it was 2014 when I first started to play it, and for a good 2 or 3 years it was something that I played all the time, sort of like WoW, but once you buy Gmod, if you've got internet, you can play it whenever you want. Gmod is a mod of Half-Life 2, which is one of my favorite games. That was number 6 on my list. But Gmod took the whole entire experience for me to another level. It's based in Half-Life 2, using Half-Life 2 assets, using Half-Life 2 physics, and in general just Valve games of that time, Counter-Strike and Team Fortress and stuff like that. But for me, it's the connection to Half-Life 2 that pulled me in. I saw character models and buildings and maps that reminded me of Half-Life 2. Then, of course, I saw a lot of stuff that didn't look anything like any of those games. But it still felt and controlled like Half-Life 2. And had a lot of the fun weapons and things that you could do in it. So a way that I would explain Gmod to somebody who hasn't ever played it is sort of like a 3-dimensional mini-game collection, like a Mario Party, only not, but it's the best way that I can think of it is you and a bunch of other people come in to this game and play a bunch of different game modes, all based and centered around this central property. Like I said, Half-Life 2 and other Valve properties from that time. But they're not like a little racing game or like a short, quick dancing game or whatever. I don't like the Super Mario. I don't like the Mario Party games. They don't really do anything for me. But I feel like I said, it's a good way to try to explain it. If you know going into Mario Party that you can select and choose from a bunch of different kinds of little mini games, play them, move on to something else, or play a few and jump out. Gmod is a really good jump in, jump out style game. But it's got a bunch of different modes in it, and they run the spectrum of all different kinds of stuff that you can do. Some of the modes actually mimic other kinds of games. There's even like a kart racing game in it. There are some other... It's probably not for me to try to explain some of the modes that I don't play, but there's a bunch of shit that you can do. There's even tons of role-playing servers. in Gmod for Star Wars, or something called Dark RP, and a bunch of other stuff, where people literally go in, build their avatar, control their character in these maps that are really, well made, and they're really cool, look like cities. It's 2004 Half-Life 2 graphics, but I still think that game holds up. I think I mentioned that in the 10 through 6 video when I talked about Half-Life 2. I still think that game looks really, really nice. But then these people just go around in that world and they live in it. They're like, okay, now I'm going to work, and then they go to a workplace, and then people come in, and it's just role play set inside this video game. But I never got into that because part of it was just because of my... I don't have that need or desire to go play with other people. It's like in World of Warcraft. Other people are there. I know that they're there. I'll interact as I can. I make friends and interact with them. But I don't go in trying to group up with a bunch of people. And I wouldn't do an RP server for that very reason. Plus, I'm not creative enough to sit there and act out a character in a world like that. The game modes that I like and that I played mostly fell to hide and seek, murder, prop hunt. And then there were some other modes that I wanted to play but never really got to. Guess Who being one of them. Those are probably like the top 4 modes that I liked. Although, like I said, Guess Who I never got to really play. Hide and seek is pretty self-explanatory. Boom. You are unleashed into a big map, and you have 30 seconds if you're a hider to run somewhere on the map and hide. Hide behind something, climb on something, go around something, whatever you got to do, depending on how the map is laid out. Just go find a place to hide and hide out there. If you're a seeker, you'll start off, there'll be one seeker. Every time they run into somebody who's hiding, the seeker is red, the hiders are blue, the hider will turn red, and now they are a seeker. So one starts and hits somebody else, and then, and you have a couple minute time limit to go through this, and if the hiders find all the seekers, then the hiders win. If there's any seekers left at the end of the time limit, then the hiders win. Even if it's one hider and 10 seekers, the hiding team gets the win if there's at least one hider left at the end of the timer. And it's super fun. It's the one time when I find, like in a game, and all these modes, but it's the one time when I go into something and I'm like, there are other players here, and there's going to be some shit asses who are going to be trolling, there's going to be some squeakers going off on their mics, but I'll go in there and do it because it's just so much fun. That's hide and seek. That would be my second favorite of the modes. My favorite mode is murder. Murder is also team-based, and a bunch of people will end up in a map of some sort, and there will be one murderer and one innocent person with a gun, and then anybody else who's in there will be innocent people without guns. And the goal is for the murderer to stab and kill everybody. They have a knife, that's their one weapon. They can stab people, or they can throw it at people and get a knife throw. And but they also can put the knife away, and if nobody saw them with the knife, then they can kind of stay disguised. It's a little bit reminiscent to Among Us, but it did it years before, and it doesn't have like call a meeting and vote people out. It's just, if you're the murderer, stab everybody. If you are the guy with the gun, you can shoot one bullet at a time. You shoot one bullet and then you have to reload, but you can shoot the murderer with the gun. And preferably that's what you want to do, is shoot the murderer and not anybody else. Because if you shoot somebody else, one, that's RDM, or random deathmatch, and that's not allowed. You're not supposed to do that. But if you also shoot the wrong person, as the character with the gun, your gun will now fly out and land on the floor, and another innocent bystander can pick it up, and suddenly they have the gun. And then you'll be blinded, and you won't be able to run, and it'll last for like 10 seconds, 30 seconds, however long it's set for the server. And so it's a penalty for doing that, but it doesn't stop people from being assholes. And then as the people who don't have a gun, you're not just left to run around and die. Most maps will have little green glowing objects that you can pick up, and if you get 5 of those collected, then you will get a gun. Just randomly will spawn on your person once you pick up the 5th clue, they call them. And that enables more people to get guns and protect themselves. And I've had many an occasion where everybody else had guns except for one person, and you're like, well, now I know you're the murderer, and I can legitimately shoot you without it being RDM. That mode, I don't know. Hide and seek is fun, and it's a whole lot of fun, but murder is exhilarating to me. It's the one time when I actually feel like I kind of crack out of my shell, and I'm like, can I kill everybody when I'm the murderer? Can I stop the murderer if I have the gun? Can I get a nice across the map snipe shot with a revolver? Like, I don't usually get into the shooting game stuff of like, yeah, I shot that guy and it was an awesome shot, and oh, look at my teammates are congratulating me for it. It's the one time where I ever get that way, and I love it. Murder, like I said, is my favorite Gmod game mode, and always will be. So like I said, murder is number 1, hide and seek is my number 2. My number 3, because it's the other main mode that I've played, is prop hunt. This is probably the one that non-Gmod people might actually know, because 1, it was a huge mode on YouTube for people who played Gmod there. Almost everybody who was playing Gmod on YouTube was playing prop hunt. Also, prop hunt has been put into other video games. The Call of Duty games have prop hunt modes in them for their multiplayer. I don't know if that's official from Activision or if that's made by the community, but I've seen tons of people playing prop hunt and Call of Duty across several of the COD games. And then recently I saw where somebody had modded it even into GTA 5, so GTA Online, I guess, properly, but it's a popular mode, and what it is 2 teams, hunters and props. At the beginning of a round, the props will spawn in as a T-posed character from Half-Life 2, and they can run around the map and find objects on the map, like, say, a fan or a monitor or a lamp, and they can click E on it and become a version of that object, and then run around on the map and try to find some place to be that either is hidden or looks like it would fit in. And, you know, you can move around during the round, or you can stay still. But the seekers, or the hunters, are on the other side, are just like soldiers with guns, a couple different guns, a shotgun, the revolver, and like an SMG, I believe, and sometimes what they call a noob tube, or a one-shot like grenade that you can launch with one of those guns. And they have to go around the map trying to discern between what's an actual prop and what is one of the prop team props. So they can like pick up something. If they pick up a can or a boot or something like that, and they can pick it up and move it around, it's a natural prop on the map. If they try to pick up something like that and it doesn't pick up, then it's a player prop, and they can shoot them, and you know, and then it's just try to kill all the props before the time runs out. But the hunters can't just go all willy-nilly and just shoot everything. If they shoot something that's not a player prop, but it's a real prop, then it will whittle away their health if they keep shooting at it. So there are, you know, risk and reward, and you can't just go around shooting everything until it's all gone. It's a fun mode, but I just think, in my opinion, it's oversaturated, and I don't find it to be as much fun. Like I said, murder, I explained why that really does something for me, why I really enjoy murder. In hide and seek, I don't know, there's just something about feeling like you're really in this world playing hide and seek with your friends, and you're not in the real world going to suddenly become a lamp and stand there and hope that somebody doesn't shoot you. But it is still a fun mode. And the last mode I want to mention before I move on to number 2 on my list is the Guess Who mode. Guess Who is sort of a derivative of the prop hunt mode, but instead of the prop team becoming items on the map, you are actually NPCs on the map. NPC characters walking around doing NPC character things, while a team of hunters are trying to figure out which ones are actual NPCs and which ones are the opposing team. And then in a lot of ways it's the same thing. If you shoot an NPC that's not a player, you'll lose health. But it kind of, I guess in a way, it kind of bridges the gap between prop hunt and hide and seek, because you're now an actual player walking around on the map, and you can still hide, but I think it's probably more fun to just be walking around the map, jumping over something, sitting down, opening a door, going in and out of a room. I really wanted to play that mode, but by the time it popped up, that was around the first time when I lost my internet and didn't have access to be able to play Gmod. And the server that I used to play on, the Banana Shack server, I think they ended up getting the Guess Who mode in one of the 4 or 5 servers that we had there. But by the time I got internet again and was able to get back on and play, the guy who owned the server had kind of shut it down and wasn't going to revive it. I had even reached out to him last year to see if he was ever going to bring it back, and he just said he wasn't sure. And it's been a real bummer, because I almost have no real reason to have regular internet. I mean, like, YouTube is a reason, and it's for some things it's easier to sit down here at my computer and do stuff than it is to mess around on my phone. But Gmod was a big reason why I wanted internet back. To pay $65 a month, which is what I pay for my internet, and to not be able to play a game like Gmod with my friends and on the servers that I knew and loved, is just it's a pain. It's a pain, not like a pain in the ass. It's a pain up here for me. I'm just bummed about it. It kind of makes me depressed when I think about it. But the game and my experiences, my memories, the friends I made on there, far outweigh, being detached from it now and having like withdrawals. So Garry's Mod, my number 3 favorite all-time game. I'm just as surprised as anybody else that a game like that could rank so high on my list, but you got to try it if you really want to understand the thing. And if somebody doesn't like online games, even like I was, I can understand, avoiding something like that, but I'm so glad that I gave it a shot. And it's all thanks to YouTubers who were playing that game almost 10 years ago, and I just really enjoyed it. It's such a fun way to interact with people and have some fun. So anyway, blah, 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 rambling on and on. Getting on to game number 2 on my list, my all-time favorite games list, my second all-time favorite game, a game that I've loved for over 15 years now, PlayStation 2 absolute classic that not everybody loves, but that game is Shadow of the Colossus. And the reason why not everybody really loves the game is because it's very, very different from a lot of other games that were out at the same time as this. Because this doesn't have like your typical normal levels. This doesn't have your fight against enemies along the way, and then you have a boss battle, and then you move on. It's an open world, but it's not like a bunch of items and marks on the map and things that you have to go do and fulfill for people. It's literally come into this strange, desolate world, go take on these 16 colossi, each a level and a boss battle rolled into one, and then get to the really epic and kind of mind-blowing finish to the game. And that's part of what I loved it. The word I mentioned before, desolate, the desolation of this beautiful world that has almost nothing else in it other than these big, large, lumbering beasts. You get some birds, you get some lizards, you get a few other things here and there, but you're not there to kill and be attacked by those things. It's just kill these big guys. So you go up to each one, you find a way to climb onto them, or you find a way to jump onto them. There's some environmental puzzles that you have to solve, but sometimes it's just a matter of running up and grabbing onto it. And you do have to press a button the whole time to grip onto these things. If you let go of that button, your character will let go of them. Some people don't like that kind of control scheme, but I just get used to it. The only complaint that I have with the controls on this game at all is the way that the horse that your character rides controls. That leaves a lot to be desired. But you just go and you find these creatures, take them down, figure out where their weak point is, stab them. You've got a sword, you raise it up. The light beam will show you what direction to go to find the Colossus, and then once you get to them, oftentimes that light beam will also light up where you're supposed to stab them. Sometimes it's one place, sometimes it's multiple places. You'll have to climb around them. Some are just wandering around on the land. Some come up and out of the sand. Some fly in the air. Some of them are in water. Some of them combine water and flying. The variety amongst these creatures, and more than anything else, the not the depth. What am I trying to say? The scale. The scale of the world and these beasts is awe-inspiring, especially for a PS2 game. I probably should have showed all these at first, but this is the original PS2 Black Label game, and then I have an unopened Greatest Hits copy. That's just for collector's purposes. I think I spent $20 on this a handful of years ago, all because it was unopened and it was Greatest Hits. And then on the PS3, there was an HD collection that has Shadow of the Colossus and the game that Team Eco, which is the developers that made Shadow of the Colossus, the first game they made was called Eco, and they were called Team Eco based on this. This PS3 HD remaster version comes with both Shadow of the Colossus and Eco. I have that. And then on the PS4 a couple years ago, Bluepoint Games did an amazing remake of this. And this, to me, is the truest form of the word remake. Same game, same world map, same characters, but rebuilt with today's technology on it. So it's beautiful. Everything just looks that much more intense and amazing. They still kept the shitty horse controls. That's one thing I wish Bluepoint would have done to kind of make things better, is that they would have fixed those controls for the horse. It's mind-numbing that you can't just free camera look with the right stick. You have to push it one way or another. Your character will slowly look over there, and as soon as you let off on that stick, it snaps back. It's real tough to navigate around the map on the horse, and you're meant to love and connect with this horse, but the controls while on the horse drove me a little bit insane. Anyway, there's the PS4 version, and then there was a special edition, and I bought the special. Like I said, my second favorite game of all time. I had to get this, so I bought both versions, but I've never opened this. This one's unopened. It's sealed. I don't know that I have any real reason to open this. It has a steelbook, artist postcards, a printed manual. Then it has some custom themes, Colossi avatar set, world map, and stickers. Maybe I'll open it one of these days to make sure that none of that digital stuff goes to waste. But I'm perfectly happy playing my regular copy and having this on the shelf. Now I've played this version several times through to the end. The PS3 version I played about a third of the way to maybe half of the way through when I got a chance to play it, but my PS3 didn't last very long, so I would have finished it over there. And then I've played the PS4 version twice, all the way through to the end. It's just an amazing game. I love it. I'm not going to spoil much about it, but I do want to talk a little bit about the story, just so I can address one little thing. I'm going to stand on my soapbox for a moment here in a second. You play this guy named Wander, who's riding on his horse named Agro, and you've got this lifeless girl with you, and nobody speaks English in the game. It's a gibberish language, but you do get subtitles that are in English. You basically parse together that Wander is bringing this girl to what is known as the Forbidden Land. He's not supposed to be here. No one's supposed to come here. And he brings this girl here because he's heard that it's possible to basically revive or resurrect somebody if you bring them here and do what is asked of you. Well, an otherworldly voice speaks to you and says that you need to complete this task of going out and finding these 16 colossi and destroying them. And you're like, okay, you have to assume that this person is either the love of his life or a family member that he loves dearly, or maybe even somebody that he's done wrong and he's worried about, what's going to happen if somebody finds out that he was responsible for their death. I tend to believe and run with the idea that it's his girlfriend, it's his wife, it's the love of his life, and he wants to bring her back. And he'll go to whatever lengths he needs to do it. So the otherworldly voice sends you out into the world, and that's when you go find the first Colossus, which is the guy on the cover here. And every time you defeat one of these things, these black smoky tendrils will shoot out and knock you down, and then you wake up and you're back in the main temple where you've brought her to, and where the voice speaks to you and tells you where to find the next one, and kind of gives you an idea of what you're going to be up against. And you go out and you do the next thing. My soapbox moment here is that I'm not going to spoil the ending, because to me the ending is great. It's amazing. It's a gut punch. But a lot of people like to say that you shouldn't have been doing what you were doing, that these colossi are walking around minding their own business and they don't give a shit about you, and you're the little shit ass who comes up with your sword and starts poking at them. And that ain't the way it is, Chief. That ain't it. You go up to those creatures, and maybe a few don't, but most of them, a large percentage of them, attack you without any provocation. I'll challenge anybody to that. I've played this game so many times. Once I started to hear that argument that you're kind of like this little bastard that just comes in here and starts disrupting everything, I went back into the game multiple times, and I would go to some of these colossi and I would just walk up to the things, never pull out my sword, never shoot an arrow at them, because you have a bow and arrow as well. I have went to several of them and not done a damn thing, and they are on your ass and they're after you. So fuck that noise about people saying that it's all on you, that you went in there and just started causing a ruckus. It's not true. So anyway, that's my soapbox moment for Shadow of the Colossus. It's just an amazing game, and it won't be for everybody. Like I said, if you're expecting a game where it drops you in a level and you just immediately have a bunch of people, soldiers or animals or monsters or whatever coming after you, and then you get to the end of that level and you kill a boss, or the open world thing of a mission, or an outpost, or a radio tower or whatever, you're not going to get any of that in this. It's simply go find those colossi, these big gigantic beasts, figure out a way to get onto them, find their weak points, stab them, bring them down, and get to the end. That's what it is. So it will turn people off. It'll be boring to people, and I completely understand it, but I love it. It's ever since I first played it, and I think it's 2005. Yeah, 2005. This was one of the earliest examples of a PS2 game that I saw and read things about months, if not maybe even further ahead, and I went to one of my local game stores here and pre-ordered it. And I don't have a problem with pre-ordering at all, in certain situations, that is. Nowadays, if I pre-order something, I go through someone like Amazon where they don't charge you the money until it's ready to ship. But I don't think that there's a problem with pre-ordering it. This game didn't let me down when I pre-ordered it. It's not a big deal. But it's a phenomenal game. I think it's... Oh, and I didn't even mention it, and I'll just mention it briefly here, but a strong contender for the argument that video games are art. As a medium, they are or can be art. Maybe some types of games, people would turn their nose up at the suggestion that it's art, but this is a work of art for sure. From the visuals to the story to the way it makes you feel to, you know, what its ultimate culmination is. It's all art, in my opinion. All right, we're down to the last one. We're down to my favorite game of all time, a game that has been my favorite game of all time since I played it. Nothing has ever rivaled it at the top of the list. Shadow of the Colossus sure comes close because it's number 2, but ever since the first day that I laid my eyes on this game and finally got to play it, picked it up, popped it in my OG PlayStation, this has been the ultimate for me. And it's a predictable game. A lot of people may see this coming because of it not on the list and me showing several other games in this series before, but not this one. So anyway, without further ado, that's right, it's Final Fantasy VII. And I don't have any qualms whatsoever with this being my favorite game of all time. Lots of people say it's overrated. Lots of people say that it's, that they just don't understand why people like this game. That's fine. You don't have to understand. I'm not going to sit here in a moment and try to explain to you why you should understand why I love this game. I just love this game. I love the world. I love the characters. I love the graphics, the graphical style. I love the music. I love the emotions that it makes me feel. That's another one of those things that I don't think you can nor need to explain to somebody, why you play something and it makes you feel emotions, why you like the story and the writing, why you like the characters. I just do. When I play this, it's good. I love it. I want to speak a little bit more actually towards the reason why I picked this game up in the first place, because despite seeing some ads in magazines and on TV for it and it looking interesting, I was never moved completely to buy the game and try it out until an incident at a video game store in Montana when I was living there in '97 when it came out. We had a store in our mall called Software Etc. I've mentioned it countless times before. It was one of the game stores that Software Etc. and Babbage's that kind of came together in the 2000s and became GameStop, the store that we all know and love to this day. That was the store that we had at the mall in the town I was living at, and it was typically my main place to go look at games. And I walked into that store on this particular day by myself. Usually I would be going in there with my friends. We'd be going as a group to the mall. But for whatever reason that day I was on my own. I went into their store, and I remember you'd come into the door from out of the main, hall of the mall. And to the left was always stuff at the window side of the doorway. It's in a mall, but it's sort of set up like a store with glass and then the doorway. And there's games and stuff displayed there. And there'd be a little pocket over there around the end of the corner, or around the end of the counter with other stuff. And then the counter would come up, angle, and then go straight like this. And the straight part like this over here was where you would go and pay for games. But on the corner, they almost always had a demo of some sort. A TV with a game console hooked up with some sort of a game in it. So I walk in that day, and there's some kids over there. I say kids because I was like in my early 20s, so they were probably teens to 20s. And they're standing over there around a TV, and they're playing something, and I could kind of see it. And I think I kind of put together that it was Final Fantasy VII. But I was wanting to go look at the shelves and look at other games and just see what they had in general. This was a particular day where I didn't buy anything. Even at the end of this, I didn't buy this game, but I knew at the end of this that I was going to. So I did my shopping, looked up and down the aisles at the console games, the PC games. They had the big box PC section that I enjoyed looking at back in those days. And they would have had, in '97, they would have had PS1, Saturn, N64, and probably some older games as well. And I looked around at stuff, and then when I got done just quenching that thirst of checking shit out, I was on my way to walk out of there, and I noticed that those guys at the counter were gone, and the TV was open. And I was like, oh, it is Final Fantasy VII. Let me just go take a look at this. And I remember looking at the screen and being like, this kind of looks cool. And so I went ahead and picked it up and played. And it was I don't know if it was a demo or if it was the actual game, but it was just at the beginning part, because it was somewhere in between, the opening and the Mako or Mako reactor. And so I went in and ran around and did a little bit of that stuff. Blew up the reactor, and then you disperse. I think that's pretty close to around where or at least my memory, I remember for sure escaping from the reactor explosion, dispersing, going through the town, bumping into Aerith for that brief moment, getting to that point where you have to jump onto the train, and then you regroup up with Barrett and Tifa and Biggs and Wedge, and Jesse. And I believe it's in that exchange when you get on the train where Barrett is being a little bit of a hard ass, and at one point he says shit. Now, of course, there's no voice acting in the original game, but there's text on the screen that pops up and it says shit. And I shit you not, I was like, did anybody just see that? That guy just cussed in this video game. My mind was blown. 1997 was years into me having watched Beavis and Butthead and watched those guys like hump couches and scratch their crotches with spatulas, and just the MTV generation and the way that everything was pushing the envelope in those days, especially on like basic cable. And yet I couldn't believe that this character on this video game had just said a cuss word. I'd never seen that in a video game. Not that I can recall. At the time of the PS1, I had played Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis and then Atari 2600 in the early 80s. I don't think I'd ever encountered a video game where they were dropping, cuss words. It left a mark. Sure, I loved the game and what I had played. I loved the characters. I loved the look of it. But just the balls of a game to do something like that impressed my juvenile little mind, I guess. And so when I got done playing the little section that was there, I left, and it stayed in my head for a while. I think it was within a few weeks I went and picked up my own copy. Now sadly it's not this one. Even with it being my favorite game in the early 2000s, I sold pretty much everything I had PS1 to get a PS2, and then didn't realize how much I was going to miss this game and this experience. So I picked this copy up, short. Well, I don't know exactly when I got this one again, but somewhere down the road. I've had it for a long time. Yeah, I was just transfixed. I played this game while I was living with my cousin. My cousin Jesse was living in this apartment. It was a one-bedroom apartment, and he wasn't supposed to have two things. He wasn't supposed to have a roommate, or at least not anybody that wasn't cleared with the landlord or the management there, and he wasn't supposed to have a pet. Well, my dad and I and my cat had moved out of Montana and then came back later that same summer, and I didn't want to stay in the place where my dad wanted us to go. I was out living on my own by that point, but he had offered, like, we'll go to this town and we'll be there. And I was like, I don't really want to. I want to go back to the town that we had moved out of. I wanted to be back with my cousins and my friends. And so it was in that time frame when I was living with my cousin at his apartment that I got Final Fantasy VII. I remember playing it at my cousin's house and having some of my friends there to watch it too. And it being one of those times when, even with 3 or 4 guys sitting behind me on a couch, and I'm sitting on the floor in front of the TV, I zoned them out because I was so locked into this story of Cloud and Tifa and Aerith and Barrett and all the other characters that you get to. Vincent Valentine, I love Cloud and I love Aerith, and that's my ship or my whatever. But Vincent Valentine I thought was the coolest character in the whole game. going on that journey with those characters, going through that whole entire story, but on my own, by myself, sometimes with my friends there watching, was just transformative, I guess you would say. And like I said, I can't really tell you why. I just loved it. Everything clicked for me. The music is phenomenal. I wanted to show this off. This is my copy of the soundtrack to Final Fantasy VII. This is the original soundtrack. The music from the game, not like an orchestral version or anything like that. This is the soundtrack from the game. I realize why some of this stuff is so much darker. My light that I bought for doing videos, I did not turn it on for this. I don't know why. I'm a dum-dum. But anyway, this is a soundtrack that I bought, not back then, when it came out, but years later, because it was an online order that I made. I think I bought it on eBay, in fact. I had to have it. It's 4 discs. It's every track from the entirety of the soundtrack, including like battle music, like when you complete a battle, it's the music from all of that on a 4-disc set that I could jam on my computer, in my car. Eventually I would rip it to my computer and I'd put it on my MP3 players over the years. I believe I've had it on my phone before, but I don't currently have this on my phone now. But it's just, the music takes me away. I catch the feels, all that, whatever, mumbo jumbo that you want to spit out. The music is amazing. And the art, like some of this kind of art here, I can't remember the name of the artist that does the art for these games. Nobuo Uematsu is the guy that does the music and did the music for most, if not all, the Final Fantasy games. It's all top notch. And like I said, just those characters, that story, and that journey that you take in it, it's all over the place. Sephiroth, Jenova, the plight of the planet that you're going through, going from Midgar for those first several hours of the game and then out into the world, Gold Saucer, I can't think of some of the stuff now because I will admit it's been a while since I played the OG game. But just every place you go to, every set piece, every character that you meet, the high wind, the somber tone that it takes later on in the game, it's kind of makes you feel despair and makes you feel sadness and stuff as it goes through to the end of the game. Now I have to say something. I'm going to lose what little credibility I have, I'm sure, for saying this, but I don't give a shit. I don't care what anybody thinks about me, and I certainly don't care what people think about how I play games. But I've never beat Final Fantasy VII. I have been to that final boss battle multiple times. I have made it 1 or 2 variations of Sephiroth, Jenova, whatever, at the end. I've never been able to defeat it myself. I've also never done the Chocobo racing and breeding thing and gotten the Knights of the Round Materia because I hate that racing shit. It's so bad. I hope in the further parts of the remake that they'll do a better version of it, because I just can't stand the way that all that stuff works in this game. It's a pain in my ass. So I think part of it is just the fact that I've never gotten the best summon materia for the whole entire game. But I have even used things like Game Shark codes, and none of the infinite hit points and infinite magic points and infinite everything codes have ever gotten me through the final battle. They never actually work to keep me alive. I don't know if it's just certain conditions that the game has to have done, or if they're the codes, nobody ever came up with codes that actually did that. So I've never gotten to see the ending of the game at my own ability. My brother beat the game at one point when he was living with me. in 1998 or 1999, and I got to see the entirety of the ending after he played it, and I've also watched it a few times, like online, years later. But I do hope that one of these days I'll fucking get in there and actually beat it for myself. But yeah, I really did think I should mention that in case you're still sitting here watching me talk about this. I've never actually beat my favorite game of all time. My favorite game that's been my favorite game now for like 24 years. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Remake, which I mentioned before about the continued parts. I have the deluxe edition of Final Fantasy VII Remake, and even though it doesn't say Part 1, we all know that this is the first part of multiple. I wanna bring up the fact that no, this does not supplant this on my list. This is awesome, and I loved it. I have some complaints, but not a whole lot. But I don't think that this is better than the original, and the reason for it is because they didn't do it the way most of us thought they were going to do it, which is basically make an almost one-to-one recreation of the original game, but on modern consoles with modern graphics. This is called a remake, but unlike the Shadow of the Colossus one, I think this is more a remake / reimagining / reboot, because they changed storyline elements. It's not just expanding parts of the story. Like, this whole entire game is probably like a 20 to 30 hour experience, and it completely takes place in Midgar, which is like a whole, I think it's the whole first disc of this game, but it's still only a few hours of this game. This is a 3-disc game altogether. But to get through Midgar in this game doesn't take all that long, but it's the entirety of the first part of this remake. That's fine though. Expanding it out, padding it out, even if you want to call it padding, I don't care about that. Just the fact that you get to see more of Midgar, you get to interact with the people of Midgar, you get to see and interact more with Barrett at his bar, Tifa's bar, Barrett's bar, I can't remember who exactly. It's Barrett's base. I think it's Tifa's bar and Barrett's base for Avalanche, and where everybody meets up, including Cloud. But the fact that you get to do stuff in there, you get to see when the plate comes down, you get more interactions with Shinra, and the Turks. That's all really cool. And if the whole entire game has to have 3 or 4 or 5 parts to expand the entirety of the game, that's cool. But my only real knock against it, and the reason why it doesn't supplant the original as my favorite game of all time, is that they altered the story. And that's fine. I think that that's cool and it's commendable. It's brave to take such a beloved game and change the story when you did a remake, because you know it's going to upset a lot of purists. It doesn't upset me because this still exists, and it always will. It's always a thing. I have it here. I have it on Steam. I have a digital version of this on my PS4. I can play it so many different places, so many different ways, and still have the original experience. So if they want to deviate from stuff on the remake, then they can go for it. I would have loved for it to have been almost one-to-one, or just expand some stuff. The fact that they decided to change storyline elements and maybe change things that's going to happen throughout the course of the game itself is fine. But that's, like I said, that's the reason why it doesn't knock the original version off the top of my list. I think Final Fantasy VII Remake is an amazing companion piece to the original game. And I think that that's what people should look at it as, and not be so damn critical about it, because I just seen a bunch of people online, not only with this, but with a bunch of other remakes and reboots and remasters, and people are like, oh, they're just going to ruin the game, they're just going to ruin it. I'm like, how do you ruin something that they didn't change this? This is a separate thing from the remake. This doesn't go away. It's not gonna leave the planet and the plane of existence. It's still here, and it always will be. The remake is another thing. If you didn't like this first remake, then don't buy any of the other parts. But I will buy them all, at least if I have the consoles that they'll exist on. I'm afraid that all the other parts are going to make it to the PS5, and I'm still undecided if the PS5 is ever going to be in my future. But if there was any possibility that they might still drop it for PS4, I would pick them up. And if I did buy a PS5 down the road just to make sure I have another console to play all my PS4 games, the Final Fantasy Remake installments would definitely be at the top of my list of games to get. I still want to see what they do with it. It's just not as impactful to me as the original Final Fantasy VII. Alright, so the little marker up here on my camera that's showing the battery's getting close to low is getting up there. This has probably been a really, really long one. I thought maybe I'd keep this one under an hour. I don't think I hit that mark. But if you watch all the way through to this part, thank you. I appreciate it. I think the only video idea I have in mind to come up next or soon is an unboxing of the Wii U, the refurbished Wii U I bought from Nintendo like 3 years ago that I've never opened up. I kind of want to check it out, play some games on the Wii U, and so that might be a video that I do in the future, and then just whatever else I decide. But I've put the favorite games of all time list to bed, at least the new revised version, and so I feel good about that. It kind of takes a little bit of a weight off of me. So anyways, once again, thanks guys for watching, and we'll see you in whatever I do next.